celebration Ostara. In this video, we cover what it is and how to celebrate. Stick around to the end for our power tip of 4 herbs you can use to incorporate into your Ostara workings. Together, we have over 30 years' experience in the occult, witchcraft, and magic.
We share insight, knowledge, advice, and lifestyle tips to make your magic go further and add potency to your work. The pagan celebration Ostara falls on the spring equinox. Ostara was the virgin goddess of spring and dawn in ancient Germany. It is for her this Sabbath is named. Ostara was also celebrated in Greek, Roman, and Nordic cultures in pre-Christian times.
Some forms of Easter celebration adopted by Christianity originate with Ostara. For example, Easter eggs. Magically speaking, eggs are symbols of rebirth, potential, and the increase of sunlight in spring. Old Germanic customs included the Easter hare, visiting homes bringing gifts of eggs, candy, and toys to good children the night before celebrations, rather like Santa Claus.
How do you celebrate Ostara? You can dye or paint eggs to decorate your home or altar. You can include colour and symbology on these. If you have children, set up an Easter egg hunt with them. You can also leave some painted eggs with positive messages and blessings on them in the woods for people to find.
You can perform a ritual to celebrate the beginning of spring. Include painted eggs and spring flowers on your altar and an offering of bread, mead, or honey.
What are the origins of Easter? Do we find it within our Father's Word, or do we find it within pagan worship? Let's find out. Hey, this is Pastor Randy. Where today I want to talk about the origins of Easter. I want to talk about whether or not we find this day within Scripture or whether we find this day within pagan worship. I want to remove the suspense. We don't find this day within Scripture. We find it within pagan worship through antiquity. Matter of fact, it goes back thousands of years, really, but today we're going to focus on the word Easter and the origins of Easter itself. And I want to read 3 different sources. The first one is from the International Standard Bible Encyclopedia. Very, very reputable source, by the way. This is not a fringe reference. This is very reputable and recognized by most Bible believers. And here's what it says about the origins of Easter. It says the English word, and again this is Easter, the word, comes from the Anglo-Saxon Eostre or Ostara, a Teutonic goddess to whom sacrifice was offered in April, so the name was transferred to the Paschal Feast. Now the word Paschal here refers to the Passover, not to the Easter. So we see here that Easter replaced Passover. Now we know historically and scripturally that the only day the apostles and the Messiah observed in the New Testament was the Passover. Never once do we find Easter. I know it's in the King James. Believe me, it's not in the Greek. It's not in the New Testament scriptures. It's simply missing from antiquity. So when did the church adopt the Easter celebration? Well, let's find out. I'm going to read another source here. This is from the New Unger's Bible Dictionary, again, a very reputable source. It says the word Easter is of Saxon origin. It says Eostre, the goddess of spring, in whose honor sacrifices were offered about Passover time each year. By the 8th century, Anglo-Saxons had adopted the name to designate the celebration of Christ's resurrection. So we see here, when this transition occurred, it occurred in the 8th century, hundreds of years after Yahshua had come and gone. He was resurrected. Hundreds of years after this point did the church adopt Easter in its liturgy. And we see here that it adopted it from the Anglo-Saxons, from pagan worship. Or I want to read one more reference. This is from the Nelson's Illustrated Bible Dictionary. And here's what it says about Easter. It says Easter was originally a pagan festival honoring Eostre, a Teutonic Germanic goddess of light and spring, at the time of the vernal equinox, a day in the spring when the sun crosses the equator and the day and night are of equal length. Sacrifices were offered in her honor. As early as the 8th century, the name was used to designate the annual Christian celebration of the resurrection of Messiah. So we see here, again, when this transition occurred, it was the 8th century. Again, it's just amazing to me. If you look at history, if you look at the Bible, what you come up with, and there's no denying the pagan origins of Easter. Again, this is not in the Bible. The Messiah and his apostles, they never observed this day, and even worse yet, according to all these references, and believe me, there's many, many more, confirming the origins of Easter. This came from the Anglo-Saxon pagan worship, and we find that it occurred somewhere around the 8th century. So very, very important. You know, as a believer, and this is so important. So listen to this. This is so important. As a believer, it's critical that we worship our Father in heaven as He defines within His Word. Because when we don't, when we worship another way, Yahweh says He has no honor for that. He has no respect for that, because He wants us to worship as He defines within His Word, not as our church may say worship is, not as our pastor or our minister may say worship is. No, we need to ignore all of that and look at Scripture and how He defines worship. And what we find scripturally, again, is that they observed the Passover, the feast days, along with the Sabbath, and not this day called Easter, which took 800 years really for the church to adopt and bring into its liturgy. Well, I pray that this has been a blessing to you. I pray that you've learned something today. I pray that you understand how important it is to worship our Father in heaven in spirit and truth, as we find in the Word. When we worship Yahweh in paganism, listen, He has no regard for that. We know in Jeremiah 10, He says, learn not the way of the heathen. As believers, we're to take that to heart. We're not to learn paganism, as we find through antiquity. We are to worship Yahweh as He defines within His Word.
can perform a ritual to celebrate the beginning of spring. Include painted eggs and spring flowers on your altar and an offering of bread, mead, or honey.